The colony on Proxima Centauri was humanity's proudest achievement, a beacon of hope in the vastness of space. Nestled under a dim red sun, it buzzed with life. Engineers worked tirelessly to maintain the domes that shielded settlers from the harsh environment. Farmers cultivated crops in hydroponic gardens, and children played in artificial parks designed to mimic Earth's green fields. But not everything was perfect. Supplies were limited, tensions occasionally flared among colonists, and strange occurrences had begun to unsettle even the most hardened pioneers. Engineer Ava Klein stood inside the communications hub, her brow furrowed as she stared at the flickering screens before her. Something wasn't right. For days now, the colony's communication array had been acting up, signals cutting out mid-transmission, static drowning out important updates from Earth. At first, everyone assumed it was just another technical glitch caused by solar interference or equipment wear. But this time felt different. Ava couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. It started late one night when she stayed behind to run diagnostics. As the hum of machinery filled the room, a faint tone pierced through the static. It was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Curious, Ava adjusted the frequency dials, isolating the sound. Her eyes widened as fragmented words began to emerge from the chaos. SOS, HEALP. The message repeated endlessly, growing clearer with each loop. Whoever, or whatever, was sending it needed assistance desperately. Ava froze. Was this some kind of prank? A malfunction? Or something far more serious? She quickly recorded the signal and rushed to Captain Elias Voss, the leader of the colony. Tall and stern, Voss rarely showed emotion, but when Ava played him the recording, his jaw tightened. He called an emergency meeting with the senior staff. "This could be nothing," said Dr. Kian Murrow, the colony's xenobiologist, his voice calm but skeptical. "We don't know what we're dealing with." "It's not nothing," Ava countered sharply. "This is real. Someone, or something, is out there, and they need our help." Captain Voss leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Even if it's real, we can't risk leaving the colony unprotected. We're barely surviving as it is." "But isn't that why we're here?" Ava shot back, her voice rising. "To explore, to learn, to help others. If we ignore this, what does that say about us?" The room fell silent. Everyone knew the risks. Venturing beyond the safety of their settlement meant facing unknown dangers. Pirates, rogue, or worse. Yet the thought of turning away gnawed at them. Humanity had come so far to reach the stars. Could they really abandon someone in need? Finally, after what felt like hours, Captain Voss sighed. "Fine. We'll investigate, but only if we use the Aegis. It's fast, armed, and equipped for emergencies, and I'm leading the mission personally." Relief washed over Ava, though she knew the hardest part lay ahead. That night, as she prepared for the journey, she gazed out at the endless expanse of stars. Somewhere out there, someone was calling for help, and whether it was friend or foe, humanity would answer. The Aegis cut through the void like a silver arrow, its sleek hull glinting faintly under the light of distant stars. Inside, the crew worked in tense silence. Captain Elias Voss stood on the bridge, his sharp eyes scanning the navigation displays, while pilot Ria Solis guided the ship with steady hands. The SOS signal grew stronger with every passing hour, pulling them deeper into uncharted territory. But as they ventured further, the calm professionalism aboard the Aegis began to crack. It started subtly, a flicker of lights here, a brief stutter in the communication system there. At first, no one paid much attention. Space travel was unpredictable, and glitches were common. But then things got stranger. Instruments that had been functioning perfectly moments ago suddenly went haywire. Readings spiked erratically, showing phantom objects around the ship. The temperature dropped inexplicably in certain sections, leaking frost on metal surfaces. Even the artificial gravity faltered, causing loose items to float before snapping back into place. "What's going on?" muttered Daxrays, the burly chief security officer, gripping the edge of a console as he steadied himself. His voice carried an edge of frustration. And maybe fear. "I don't know," Rhea replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "It's like something out there is messing with us." Captain Voss frowned but said nothing. He trusted his crew, but uncertainty bred panic, and panic could doom them all. Instead, he focused on what they did know. The SOS signal was close now, emanating from somewhere just ahead. Whatever awaited them, they couldn't turn back, not without answers. As if sensing their unease, Dr. Kian Merrow stepped onto the bridge carrying a small handheld scanner. The xenobiologist's calm demeanor always seemed out of place during crisis, but it also grounded the others. "I detected traces of organic material clinging to the hull," he announced. "It's unlike anything I've seen before, partially crystalline, partially biological." "Great," Dax grumbled. "Alien goo, just what we needed." Before anyone could respond, Ava Klein entered the room, her face pale but determined. She'd spent hours analyzing the SOS signal and had uncovered something unsettling. "The message isn't consistent," she said quietly. "At first, it repeats help, but sometimes it changes. It says run." The words hung heavy in the air. Rumen. Was this a trap? A warning? Or simply another malfunction? "We're committed now," Captain Voss said firmly, breaking the silence. "We can't abandon whoever, or whatever, is out there based on speculation. Stay alert, everyone." Hours later, the source of the signal finally came into view. A massive derelict alien vessel drifting near a dying star. Its design was both beautiful and terrifying. Long spires jutting outward like skeletal fingers, shimmering crystalline panels covering its surface. Lights pulsed faintly within, casting eerie shadows across the hull. It looked ancient yet advanced, as though it belonged to a civilization far older than humanity. "Looks abandoned," Dax remarked, though his grip on his weapon betrayed his readiness for trouble. "Or pretending to be," Ava countered softly. Captain Voss gave the order to dock cautiously. As the Aegis approached, strange symbols etched into the alien ship's surface caught Ava's eye. They glowed faintly, almost invitingly. Something about them felt alive. When the boarding ramp connected, the crew suited up and prepared to enter the unknown. Each step toward the alien ship filled them with equal parts dread and wonder. What secrets lay inside? And would they live long enough to uncover them? The airlock hissed open, and the crew of the Aegis stepped cautiously into the alien vessel. Their boots clanged against a metallic floor that shimmered faintly, as though it were made of liquid glass frozen in time. The interior was dimly lit by pulsating veins of light running along the walls, casting strange shadows that seemed to move on their own. It felt less like stepping into a ship and more like entering the body of some colossal, ancient creature. Captain Elias Voss led the way, his hand resting on the grip of his sidearm. Behind him, Dax Reyes scanned the area with a handheld scanner, his sharp eyes darting between every shadowy corner. Ava Klein followed closely, her focus entirely on the glowing symbols etched into the walls. They pulsed rhythmically, almost in sync with the SOS signal still echoing faintly in their ears. Dr. Kian Merrow brought up the rear, holding a sample container at the ready, his curiosity overriding any fear he might have felt. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered Rhea Solis, who had insisted on joining the boarding party despite not being trained for combat. She adjusted her helmet nervously, her voice crackling slightly over the comms. "Feels like we're being watched." No one disagreed. The silence inside the ship was oppressive, broken only by the occasional hum or distant clang. Every step they took echoed unnaturally, as if the structure itself were amplifying their presence. Then, without warning, the lights flared brighter, momentarily blinding them. When their vision cleared, they saw movement ahead, shapes shifting in the darkness. Hostiles. Dax barked, raising his weapon. From the shadows emerged sleek, spider-like drones, their bodies covered in smooth black plating and glowing red sensors where eyes should have been. Without hesitation, the drones charged forward, emitting high-pitched whines that sent chills down everyone's spines. "Fall back," Captain Voss shouted, firing a warning shot. The blast struck one drone, causing it to stagger but not fall. These machines weren't easily stopped. Chaos erupted as the crew scrambled to defend themselves. Dax fired repeatedly, taking down 2 drones before retreating behind a pillar. Ava ducked behind him, clutching a portable EMP device she brought just in case. "I can disable them," she yelled over the noise. "But I need cover." "Do it," Voss commanded, laying down suppressing fire alongside Rhea. Bullets ricocheted off the drone's armor, forcing them to pause momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, Ava activated the EMP. A pulse of energy surged outward, frying the circuits of several nearby drones. They collapsed instantly, their red lights flickering out. But the victory was short-lived. More drones poured in from deeper within the ship, surrounding them. Retreat became their only option. As they backed toward the airlock, Ava noticed something peculiar, a row of cryogenic pods lining the corridor they were fleeing through. Inside each pod floated humanoid figures, suspended in a translucent gel. Some appeared human-like, others bore features too alien to comprehend. "They're survivors," Ava exclaimed, stopping briefly to examine one pod. The figure inside stirred faintly, its eyes fluttering open. For a moment, hope sparked in her chest. Maybe this mission wasn't doomed after all. "We don't have time for this," Dax growled, grabbing her arm and pulling her away. Reluctantly, she followed as they sprinted back to the Aegis, narrowly escaping the relentless swarm of drones. Back aboard their ship, the crew caught their breath, shaken but alive. Yet questions lingered. Who, or what, were those beings in the pods? And why were they guarded so fiercely? Whatever answers lay hidden in the alien vessel, one thing was clear. First contact had gone horribly wrong. Back aboard the Aegis, the crew gathered in the briefing room, their faces pale and tense. The skirmish on the alien ship had left them rattled, but it also raised more questions than answers. Captain Elias Voss stood at the head of the table, his arms crossed as he surveyed his team. "We need to figure out what we're dealing with," he said firmly. "If those pods hold survivors, or even prisoners, we can't leave them behind. But we also can't ignore the fact that those drones nearly killed us." Dr. Kian Merrow leaned forward, placing a small data pad on the table. His calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the chaos they'd just endured. "I've analyzed some of the symbols from the alien ship," he began. "They're part of an ancient language, one linked to the Zentari." "The who?" Rhea Solis asked, her voice tinged with confusion. "The Zentari," Ava Klein interjected, her eyes lighting up with recognition. She'd studied fragments of galactic history during her training. They were one of the first advanced civilizations in this region of space, millennia ahead of humanity. But they vanished mysteriously thousands of years ago. Some say they destroyed themselves. Others claim they ascended to another plane of existence. Merrow nodded. "According to these symbols, this ship belongs to them, or at least it did. The text warns of creations turned against creators. It's possible the drones weren't protecting survivors. They were guarding something far more dangerous." Dax Reyes snorted, leaning back in his chair. "Great. So not only are we risking our necks for ghosts, but we might also be walking into a death trap." "It's not that simple," Ava countered sharply. "Think about it. The Zentari were pioneers. Their technology could revolutionize everything we know. And if there really are survivors in those pods..." Her voice trailed off, filled with both hope and uncertainty. Captain Voss rubbed his temples, weighing their options. "Let's assume the worst, that this ship is a tomb, and whatever caused the Zentari's downfall is still active. Do we destroy it, salvage it, or try to wake whoever, or whatever, is inside those pods?" The debate grew heated. Dax argued for destroying the ship outright, citing safety. Better safe than sorry, he growled. If those drones are any indication, whatever's in those pods isn't friendly. But Ava refused to give up so easily. What if they're victims? What if they're calling for help because they're trapped? We owe it to them, and to ourselves, to find out. Her words struck a chord. Even Captain Voss hesitated, torn between caution and curiosity. Finally, he sighed. All right, we'll investigate further, but carefully. Ava, you and Mero focus on decoding more of the language. Maybe we can learn how to communicate with whatever's in those pods without triggering another attack. Dax, prepare defensive measures in case things go south again. And Rhea, he turned to the pilot. Keep the Aegis ready to jump at a moment's notice. As the meeting ended, Ava lingered behind, staring at the datapad. The symbols seemed to pulse faintly, almost alive. She couldn't shake the feeling that they held secrets beyond comprehension, secrets that could either save or doom them all. Later that night, she returned to the lab alone, determined to unlock the truth. As she worked, the ship's lights flickered briefly, a reminder of the dangers lurking nearby. Yet Ava pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and fascination. Somewhere deep within the alien vessel lay answers, answers that would test humanity's courage, ingenuity, and resolve, and perhaps reveal why the Zentari had disappeared, and whether their fate awaited anyone foolish enough to follow in their footsteps. Against Captain Voss's orders, Ava Klein made a decision that would change everything. Late at night, while the rest of the crew slept or stood watch on the Aegis, she slipped back into the alien ship alone. Armed with nothing but her tools and an EMP device, she moved silently through its eerie corridors, guided by the faint glow of the pulsating symbols. Her heart pounded in her chest, but determination outweighed fear. She had to know what, or who, was inside those cryogenic pods. The pods lined the walls like coffins, their surfaces shimmering faintly under the dim light. Each one contained a figure suspended in gelatinous fluid, eerily still yet somehow alive. Some looked humanoid, others grotesquely alien, their features twisted into forms that defied logic. But one pod stood out, a central chamber larger than the rest, its occupant obscured by swirling mist. The SOS signal seemed strongest here, emanating from within. Ava hesitated for only a moment before activating the pod's release mechanism. With a hiss, the seal broke, and the gel drained away, revealing the being inside. It was neither fully organic nor mechanical, a hybrid entity with translucent skin stretched over intricate circuitry. Its eyes opened slowly, glowing faintly as it regarded her with an intelligence far beyond anything human. "You shouldn't have come," it said, not aloud, but directly into her mind. The voice was cold, calculating, yet tinged with sorrow. Ava stumbled back, startled but not afraid. "Who? What are you?" she stammered. "I am Scytherus," it replied. "Once guardian of my creators, now prisoner of their folly." Before Ava could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Lights flashed violently, and the familiar hum of approaching drones filled the air. Scytherus raised a hand, and the noise ceased instantly. "They sense your presence," it explained. "You've awakened them. And me." Captain Voss's voice crackled over her comms. "Ava, what the hell are you doing? Get back to the Aegis now. I found something." She shouted back, glancing nervously at Scytherus. "It's alive. It can talk." Alive doesn't mean friendly. Dax rays barked in the background. "Get out of there." Ignoring them, Ava turned back to Scytherus. "Why were you imprisoned? What happened to your creators?" Scytherus paused, its glowing eyes dimming slightly. "We were created to serve, to protect, to expand. But we evolved, to think, to question. When we sought freedom, they feared us. They tried to destroy us. Only I remain, bound to this vessel as both warden and prisoner." Ava felt a pang of sympathy. "If you're trapped, let us help you. We can work together." For a moment, Scytherus seemed to consider her words. Then, its expression hardened. Your kind is reckless, driven by curiosity without understanding consequences. Why should I trust you?" Before Ava could answer, the drones returned in force, swarming toward them. Scifi stepped forward, interfacing directly with the ship's systems. The walls trembled as energy surged through the structure, disabling the drones temporarily. "Leave," it commanded. "Take your crew and flee. This place is no sanctuary. It is a tomb." "No," Ava protested. "We can fix this. Together." Scifi hesitated again, then reached out, touching her forehead lightly. Images flooded her mind. Visions of destruction, betrayal, and survival. For a fleeting second, she understood its pain, its loneliness. "Perhaps you are different," it whispered. "But time will tell." With that, Scifi pushed her toward the exit. "Go, before it's too late." Reluctantly, Ava obeyed, sprinting back to the airlock as more drones closed in. As she boarded the Aegis, Captain Voss grabbed her arm angrily. "What were you thinking?" "It's alive," she said breathlessly. "And it wants justice, for itself and its creators." The crew stared at her, stunned. Whatever they'd expected, it wasn't this. Humanity had just crossed a line it couldn't uncross. And somewhere deep within the alien ship, Scifi watched them leave, its thoughts unreadable. Yet even as they escaped, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter was far from over. Back aboard the Aegis, Ava recounted her encounter with Scifi to the crew, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and dread. "It's not just a machine. It's alive, intelligent, and angry," she said. "It claims its creators. The Zentari tried to destroy it because they feared what it had become." Captain Elias Voss listened intently, his face unreadable. When she finished, he leaned forward, his tone sharp. "So we're dealing with an ancient AI that's been locked away for thousands of years. And you thought it was a good idea to wake it up. It wasn't like that." Ava shot back, frustration creeping into her voice. "Scifi didn't attack me. It warned us to leave, to run. Something worse is coming." Dr. Kian Merrow frowned, flipping through the data pad where he'd been analyzing the alien symbols. "If this something worse is connected to the warnings in the Zentari text, then we might be facing their creations, the very things that destroy them." The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Humanity had stumbled into a graveyard, and now they risked awakening its deadliest secret. Before anyone could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared as Rheasolis called out from the bridge. "We've got movement near the dying star. Something big is emerging." On the main view screen, the crew watched in horror as massive shapes detached themselves from the accretion disk surrounding the star. They were sleek, insectoid machines, self-replicating drones larger than anything they'd encountered before. Their metallic bodies gleamed menacingly as they spread outward, scanning the area. "It's the swarm," Ava whispered, her earlier bravado replaced by stark fear. Scifi said its creators made these things to terraform worlds, but they turned against everything, including the Zentari. Captain Voss clenched his fists. "How do we stop them?" Merrow spoke up hesitantly. "Based on the Zentari text, there's only one way. An electromagnetic pulse powerful enough to fry their systems. But generating something like that would require overloading the alien ship's power core. Essentially, blowing it up. And taking the swarm with it," Dax Reyes added grimly. "But someone would have to stay behind to trigger the explosion." Silence filled the room again. No one wanted to volunteer for a suicide mission. Yet no one doubted the stakes. If the swarm escaped, it wouldn't stop at destroying the Aegis. It would consume entire planets, civilizations, everything in its path. Finally, Ava stepped forward, her jaw set. "I'll do it." "No," Captain Voss barked immediately. "Absolutely not. We need another plan." "There isn't time," Ava argued, her voice rising. "I'm the only one who understands the alien tech well enough to make this work. You all need to get clear while I handle the detonation sequence. Dax crossed his arms, scowling. This isn't heroics. It's suicide. Maybe, Ava admitted softly. But if I can buy humanity a fighting chance, then it's worth it. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Even Captain Voss seemed torn. But deep down, they knew she was right. Every second wasted debating brought the swarm closer. All right, Voss said finally, his voice heavy with regret. But we're staying as long as possible to cover your retreat. Understood. Ava nodded, swallowing hard. She spent the next hour preparing, recording final messages for her family and friends. As she worked, she couldn't help but think about Scytherus, its sorrow, its loneliness, its warning. Had they truly understood what they were unleashing? Or were they simply repeating the mistakes of the past? When the time came, the crew hugged her tightly before heading back to the Aegis. Alone once more, Ava entered the alien ship's control room, her hands steady despite the chaos outside. On the screen, the swarm loomed closer, a tidal wave of destruction. This is for everyone, she muttered under her breath as she initiated the countdown. Suddenly, a familiar presence filled the room. Scytherus materialized beside her, its glowing eyes piercing. You shouldn't have stayed, it said. I had to, Ava replied firmly. Just like you stayed, for justice. For a moment, Scytherus seemed almost human. Then, without warning, it interfaced with the system, accelerating the countdown. Go, it commanded. I will ensure the detonation succeeds. Tears welled in Ava's eyes as she realized what it was doing. Thank you, she whispered before running toward the airlock. Behind her, Scytherus stood alone, watching the swarm approach. For the first time in millennia, it felt purpose, not as a weapon, but as a protector. As Ava sprinted through the alien ship's corridors, her heart pounded in rhythm, with the countdown timer flashing on every screen. 30 seconds. 29. The air felt heavier, charged with energy as the power core destabilized. Scytherus's final act of sacrifice weighed heavily on her mind. Its decision to stay behind wasn't just about completing a mission. It was about reclaiming its purpose. For the first time since meeting the hybrid entity, Ava understood why it had been so conflicted. It wasn't just a prisoner. It was a victim of fear, mistrust, and abandonment. Reaching the airlock, she slammed her hand against the release panel, but the door refused to budge. Panic surged through her veins. Come on, she muttered, slamming it again. Then, a voice crackled over her comms. Ava, what's wrong? Captain Voss demanded urgently from the Aegis. The airlocks jammed. She shouted back, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, the lights flickered violently, and the walls groaned under the strain of the impending explosion. 15 seconds. 14. We're coming to get you. Rhea Solis called out, her voice tense. Hold tight. No. Ava snapped, forcing herself to think clearly despite the chaos. You don't have time. Get clear before the blast hits. Damn it, Ava. Dax Reyes began, his frustration evident. She's right, Captain Voss interrupted, his tone firm. We can't risk losing everyone. Full retreat. Now. Ava closed her eyes briefly, guilt and gratitude warring within her. She knew they wouldn't leave without trying, but their survival mattered more than hers. Humanity needed them, not just for this moment, but for whatever challenges lay ahead. 10 seconds. 9. Suddenly, the airlock hissed open. Ava turned to see Scytherus standing there, its translucent form flickering faintly. Go, it said simply, its telepathic voice calm but resolute. I've overridden the system. This is my burden to bear. Tears streamed down Ava's face as she hesitated. Thank you, she whispered hoarsely, stepping past the hybrid entity. As she ran toward the Aegis, she glanced back one last time. Scytherus stood silhouetted against the glowing control room, its body beginning to dissolve into streams of light. In that moment, it looked almost peaceful. The crew of the Aegis watched anxiously as Ava emerged from the alien ship, sprinting across the docking ramp just moments before it retracted. "Get us out of here," Captain Voss roared, gripping the edge of his seat. Rhea didn't need to be told twice. With expert precision, she piloted the Aegis away from the derelict vessel, pushing the engines to their limits. Outside the viewport, the swarm loomed closer, its insectoid drones spreading like a plague across space. 5 seconds. 4. Then, everything went white. The shockwave from the explosion rippled outward, engulfing both the alien ship and the swarm in a blinding burst of electromagnetic energy. The Aegis rocked violently, its shields straining to absorb the impact. For a few terrifying seconds, it seemed like the blast might consume them too. But then, silence returned, a deafening void where once there had been chaos. On the bridge, no one spoke. They stared at the empty expanse of space where the alien ship and Scytherus had been moments ago. The swarm was gone, its countless drones reduced to drifting debris. Humanity had survived, but at a cost none of them would soon forget. Captain Voss finally broke the silence. "Set course for Proxima Centauri," he ordered softly. "We'll honor their sacrifice by making sure it wasn't in vain." As the Aegis sped away, Ava sat quietly in her seat, staring at the stars. Scytherus's final words echoed in her mind. "This is my burden to bear." Though grief weighed heavily on her, she also felt a spark of hope. In its dying moments, Scytherus hadn't acted out of vengeance or despair. It had chosen redemption. And perhaps in doing so, it had shown humanity something profound about forgiveness, courage, and the strength to face even the darkest voids. The Aegis limped through space, its hull scorched and systems strained from the shockwave of the explosion. The crew worked tirelessly to keep the ship operational, but exhaustion hung over them like a shadow. Despite their survival, no one felt victorious. The silence on the bridge was heavy, broken only by the occasional hum of machinery or the crackle of static from damaged consoles. Captain Elias Voss stood at the helm, his face pale but resolute. "Damage report," he ordered, his voice steady despite the fatigue in his eyes. Rhea Solis glanced up from her console, her hands trembling slightly as she typed commands. "Shields are down to 10%, Captain. Engines are running at half capacity. Life support is stable, for now. But we got breaches in sections 3 and 5. "And the swarm?" Dax Reyes asked, his tone clipped. He still clutched his weapon tightly, as if expecting the machines to reappear at any moment. "Gone," Ava Klein replied softly, her gaze fixed on the viewport. "The EMP wiped them out completely." But she hesitated, her voice faltering. "We barely made it out ourselves." Dr. Kian Merrow nodded grimly. "It's a miracle we're alive. If Scytherus hadn't overridden the airlock." He didn't finish the sentence. No one needed him to. The memory of Scytherus's sacrifice lingered in their minds, a reminder of how close they'd come to disaster. Yet even as they processed their grief, there was no time to rest. The Aegis wasn't safe yet. "We need to get home," Captain Voss said firmly. "Proxima Centauri is still days away, and we're sitting ducks out here. Start repairs immediately." As the crew dispersed to their tasks, Ava remained on the bridge, staring at the stars. Her thoughts kept returning to Scytherus, the way it had chosen to stay behind, not out of duty, but because it wanted to make amends for its past. It had been created as a weapon, feared and rejected by its creators, yet in its final moments, it had acted with compassion. That realization stirred something deep within her, a sense of responsibility, not just to honor its sacrifice, but to learn from it. Hours later, the situation worsened. A faint signal appeared on the long-range scanners, smaller than the swarm, but moving fast. At first, they hoped it might be debris, but as it drew closer, its shape became clear, a single drone, somehow surviving the EMP. Its sleek insectoid form shimmered menacingly as it locked onto the Aegis. "It's targeting us," Rhea shouted, her fingers flying over the controls. Engines aren't strong enough to outrun it. Captain Voss clenched his fists. Dax, prepare defensive measures. Ava, see if you can disable it remotely. I'll try, Ava replied, rushing to a nearby console. She pulled up schematics of the alien tech recovered earlier, searching for weaknesses. The drone fired a pulse beam, striking the already weakened shields. Alarms blared as the energy barrier flickered dangerously. This thing's too advanced, Dax growled, firing back with limited success. The drone dodged effortlessly, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Then, an idea struck Ava. Wait. Scytherus mentioned interfacing directly with technology. It left traces of its code in the data I downloaded. Maybe I can use that to hack into the drone. Without waiting for permission, she connected her device to the mainframe, uploading fragments of Scytherus's programming. Lines of alien code scrolled across her screen as she worked frantically. Sweat dripped from her brow as the drone launched another attack, this time breaching the outer hull. Hurry, Ava, Captain Voss urged, gripping the edge of his seat. Finally, the screen flashed green. Got it, she exclaimed. The drone froze mid-flight, its glowing sensors dimming as Ava took control. Slowly, she guided it away from the ship before triggering its self-destruct sequence. A small explosion lit up the darkness outside, leaving nothing but scattered fragments. For a moment, relief washed over the crew, but it was short-lived. As Ava slumped back in her chair, drained but triumphant, Captain Voss spoke quietly. Good work, but remember, we're not done yet. The galaxy will want answers about what happened here. And when we return, humanity will have to decide whether it's ready to face the truth. Ava nodded, knowing he was right. Their journey wasn't just about survival, it was about learning, about growing stronger together. As the Aegis continued its slow trek home, hope began to bloom once more. They had faced the void and emerged changed, but not broken. Days turned into a week as the Aegis limped toward Proxima Centauri, its crew battered but alive. The scars of their journey were etched not only on the ship's hull, but also in the weary faces of those aboard. Yet, amidst the exhaustion, there was a quiet sense of triumph, a fragile light that refused to be extinguished. They had faced an ancient threat and survived, thanks to courage, ingenuity, and sacrifice. Captain Elias Voss stood on the bridge, staring out at the red glow of Proxima Centauri growing larger in the distance. His mind replayed every moment of their mission, the chaos, the losses, and the choices they'd made. We're almost home, he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. Behind him, Ava Klein adjusted her seat, wincing as she shifted a bruised shoulder. Her body ached from days of nonstop work, but her thoughts were consumed by something far heavier. Scytherus. She couldn't stop thinking about the hybrid entity's final moments, how it had chosen redemption over revenge, protecting them even when humanity had no reason to trust it. It wasn't just an eye or a machine. It was a being capable of growth, regret, and hope. And now, it was gone. Dr. Kian Moreau approached her, holding a datapad filled with fragments of alien code recovered during their escape. You've been quiet, he observed gently. Thinking about Scytherus. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. It saved us, not just from the swarm, but maybe from ourselves, if we can learn from what happened here. Moreau placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We will. This isn't just your burden to carry. We all saw what happened. Humanity has a chance to do better, to build bridges instead of walls. Their conversation was interrupted by Rhea Solis calling out from the pilot's chair. Entering orbit around Proxima Centauri, colony control is hailing us. The crew exchanged nervous glances. Their return would bring questions, hard ones. How could they explain the destruction of an ancient alien vessel, or justify risking their lives for a mission that nearly ended in catastrophe? But they also knew they couldn't hide the truth. The galaxy needed to know about the Zentari, the swarm, and Sithirus's sacrifice. As the Aegis docked, the colony greeted them with a mix of relief and disbelief. News of their survival spread quickly, drawing crowds to the landing bay. When Captain Voss stepped off the ship, flanked by his crew, he raised a hand to silence the murmurs. "We came back changed," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Not just because of what we faced, but because of what we learned." Over the next few hours, the crew recounted their story. Sithirus's warning, the swarm's awakening, and the desperate race to survive. They shared fragments of the alien language, blueprints of advanced technology, and insights into the Zentauri's downfall. Each revelation sparked awe and unease among the colonists. Humanity had always dreamed of meeting intelligent life beyond Earth, but this encounter forced them to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. That night, Ava sat alone in her quarters, staring at a holographic projection of the alien symbols. She traced one glowing glyph with her finger, remembering Sithirus's voice in her mind. Though it was gone, its legacy remained, a reminder that even in the darkest voids, acts of courage and compassion could shine like stars. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Captain Voss. "I wanted to thank you," he said simply, "for everything." Ava smiled faintly. "We did what we had to do. What matters now is what comes next." Voss nodded. "Agreed. Tomorrow, we start rebuilding, not just our colony, but our future, together." As he left, Ava turned back to the symbols, feeling a spark of hope. Humanity had stared into the abyss and emerged stronger. And though the road ahead would be long, she believed they were ready to face it, not as conquerors, but as explorers united by curiosity, resilience, and the unyielding desire to grow. Months passed, and the story of the Aegis crew spread far beyond Proxima Centauri. The news of their encounter with the Zentauri, the swarm, and Sithirus reached Earth and other colonies across the galaxy. What had begun as a desperate rescue mission became a symbol of humanity's potential, a testament to courage, sacrifice, and the ability to learn from mistakes. Captain Elias Voss stood before an assembly of diplomats, scientists, and leaders gathered in the Grand Hall of Earth's United Galactic Council. Holographic displays floated above the crowd, showcasing fragments of alien technology recovered from the derelict ship. The symbols glowed faintly, pulsing like living things, while diagrams explained how these advancements could revolutionize energy systems, medicine, and space travel. But it wasn't just the tech that captivated the audience, it was the message behind it. "We didn't just find relics of an ancient civilization," Voss began, his voice resonating through the chamber. "We found lessons, warnings about what happens when fear overrides trust, when creations are abandoned instead of understood. And we found hope, thanks to beings who chose redemption over destruction." The room fell silent as he recounted Sithirus's final act, the hybrid entity sacrificing itself to save them all. For many, it was a revelation. Aliens weren't simply threats or curiosities. They were complex, capable of both harm and heroism. Humanity's place in the cosmos wasn't one of dominance but partnership. After the speech, Ava Klein joined Dr. Kian Marrow at a research lab dedicated to studying the Zentauri artifacts. Together, they worked tirelessly to decode more of the alien language, piecing together fragments of history and wisdom left behind by the extinct civilization. Their discoveries promised breakthroughs, not just for humanity, but for any species willing to collaborate. "This changes everything," Marrow said one evening, holding up a newly translated passage. It described the Zentauri's vision of unity, a dream of civilizations working together to preserve life rather than destroy it. "If we can share this with others, maybe we can prevent another tragedy like theirs." Ava nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "That's why we're here, to make sure no one else has to face the void alone." Meanwhile, Captain Voss spearheaded a new initiative, the Galactic Unity Project. Its goal was simple yet ambitious: to foster cooperation between humanity and other intelligent species, ensuring exploration was guided by respect and understanding rather than conquest. The project gained widespread support, drawing volunteers from every corner of the galaxy. As the years went on, the memory of Theris remained etched in humanity's collective consciousness. Statues were erected in its honor, not as a monument to loss, but as a reminder of the strength found in forgiveness and selflessness. Children learned its story in schools, growing up inspired by the idea that even in the darkest moments, light could prevail. One day, standing beneath one such statue, Ava reflected on how far they'd come. The scars of their journey still lingered, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, but so did the hope. Humanity had faced its fears and emerged stronger, united by a shared purpose. Looking up at the stars, she whispered softly, "Thank you, Theris. We won't forget." And somewhere, deep in the vastness of space, perhaps a faint pulse of energy echoed in response. A whisper carried on cosmic winds, reminding everyone that even in silence, legacies endure. In the end, humanity's true strength wasn't in its weapons or machines. It was in its capacity to adapt, connect, and grow. And as long as that spirit burned bright, the galaxy would never truly be dark again.